Yeah. Okay.
Hi, and a very pleasant afternoon to each and everyone. Today, I'm going to present my study entitled Thermal Tolerance and Temperature Effects on Biochemical Composition of Subtropical Turbinate Snails. Before I go further, let me introduce myself. My name is Rosli Zawati Abla, and my study is supervised under supervision of Dr. Daniel Bucha and Dr. Christine Bekandov. Here is my overview of presentation today, where I'm going to cover 7 main topics, and I'm going to give you a bit of my background of the studies, followed with the research aims, preliminary research, methodology, results, conclusion, and last but not least, my future plans. Mollusks for food consumption. As we know, mollusks are being eaten for human food, and it has been consumed throughout the human history. And they had a place on the menu in many countries throughout the world. And this picture is an example of the mollusk that can be eaten. In Australia itself, the most popular mollusk is Haliotis rubra, which is abalone species, and oyster species, but not with the turban snails. But, however, the turban snails can be found in Australia, and they are sold in Melbourne and Sydney. As we know, mollusk fisheries has become an important industry to the world of fisheries. And in 2007, we can see from the data, almost 7.4 billion tons has been harvested from the capture fisheries production. But the number of the harvesting has decreased until 2009, and we don't know for what reason this happened, probably due to the disease matter. And in the according to fisheries point of view, they divided mollusks into 3 main classes, which consist of gastropods, bivalves, and cephalopods. In spite of having occupied only 2% of the total capture fisheries production in 2009, gastropods also contribute a higher money return. As we know, mollusks contain a lot of nutritious components, and they can serve as energy and protein for human beings. The biochemical composition is normally used in order to measure the quality of the flesh. And the typical analysis is protein composition by measuring the moisture content, protein content, lipid and fatty acid, ash, and carbohydrate. However, the nutritive value can be varied between species and within species according to the seasons. For instance, omega-3 polyunsaturated fatty acid can help to prevent coronary heart disease and inflammatory disease. This is the main source of essential of fatty acid for human beings. This is data from the previous study that has been done on edible mollusks in Australia. As we can see, fatty acid can be divided into 3 main classes, which consist of saturated, monosaturated, and polyunsaturated. Polyunsaturated is essential fatty acid for human health, since humans cannot synthesize this fatty acid. And as we can see also, the polyunsaturated is always higher than saturated. And this is one of the criteria we can use in order to know the quality of the fatty acid itself. And from this study, they have been done on turbo and gelatus, but they found that saturated and polyunsaturated, they have the same level. But we don't know from which season they have been sampling for this species and how many species, how many replication has been done on this species. Further studies needed in order to know this. Mollusks not also good for health. They also have ability to accumulate the trace element from the environment. They accumulate this trace element either directly through gills or even from food particles. Trace element normally can be divided into 3 main classes, which consist of structural, essential, and toxic. And we can find trace element in all living organisms, but detrimental detrimental cause, but they can cause detrimental effect if the concentration higher or lower than the suitable needed. For instance, if human beings have been eaten a higher amount of contaminated mollusks, this might elevate the trace element in their bodies. There is a lot of study has been done on bivalves, but no previous study has been done on trace element accumulation on turban snails from New South Wales. Due to that, it is important to observe, to study these turban snails, since no study has been focused on this species yet, even though they have been eaten. In Australia itself, the common turban snail consists of Turbomilitaris, Lunella torquata, and Lunella undulata. And from these three species, Turbomilitaris is the biggest one. Three of these turban snails can be found overlap in New South Wales seawater, but Turbomilitaris only can be found in east coast of Queensland and up to the center of New South Wales, while Lunella torquata can be found extend to the western Australia, and undulata can be found in Tasmania or even south of Australia. However, there has been a great discussion about the shifting of the Turbomilitaris nowadays. Since in 1970s, they can be observed easily in northern New South Wales, but then in 2005, they have been observed in Long Reef, Collaroy, and presently they are observed in up to Wollongong and Batman's Bay. This shifting are possibly due to climate change. As we know, climate change is not a new event. It has been, climate change will be increased if the human activities increase. For instance, land clearing, fossil fuels, burning of fossil fuels, and so on. And the increment of the human activities might generating a higher greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. And the ocean temperature will be increased once the equilibration between the atmosphere temperature and the ocean temperature happen. Australia has been one of the most ocean hotspot country. According to the BOM website, it shows that in New South Wales there are at least 0.20 temperature has been increased in each 10 years from 1970 to present in all of the season. As we know, climate change has a lot of impact to the marine ecosystem. Some of them found that temperature will change the distribution of the organism of the population. And increasing of that temperature also will increase the possibility of mortality and also increase the disease infections. The elevated temperature will also increase the metabolism of the organism. And due to this, energy requirement will also increase. Nutritional quality is one of the factors which contribute to the energy requirement. And nutritional quality not only impact the level of the energy, but it also will impact the reproductive cycle in organism. Due to this, it is good to understand the relation between seasonal variation and reproductive cycle in order to assess the direct impact of the temperature to the nutritional quality of the organism itself. As we know, all organisms have a range of tolerable body temperature. For my species, turban snail, they are well known as poikilothermic organisms, where they can allow their body temperature to fluctuate according to the surrounding. And there are three factors which influencing the lethal exposure, which are exposure temperature, exposure duration, and individual variation. This graph shows that the physiological tolerance range, all of organisms has a physiological tolerance range. And if the temperature exceeds this range, This might lead to protein denaturation, inadequate oxygen supply, and also will lead to death. And in order to measure the temperature tolerance, common critical thermal maximum is the common method. As critical thermal maximum means temperature at which the animal lost their ability to escape the condition. And normally, previous study, what they did is they always combine critical thermal maximum with preferred temperature. As preferred temperature means that in a thermal gradient where the organism tend to spend the most time in. This table shows that previous study that has been done on abalone species and one Megastria undosa, which is Turbinidae family. But none of this has been done on local species from New South Wales. As we can see from the table, critical thermal maximum at 50% is always higher than preference temperature. But this also depending on the acclimatization temperature. Water temperature triggers spawning in many mollusks. Reproduction uses energy reserve. Post-spawning mollusks become more vulnerable to temperature stress. In order to understand the interaction between temperature, reproduction, and nutrition, it is needed to understand the reproductive cycle of fishery species, effect of spawning on thermal tolerance, and also seasonal variation in nutritional quality in relation to the reproductive cycle. Previous study has documented on reproductive cycle of Turbo torquatus, which has now been known as Lunella torquata. And they found that this species has 2 times of spawning event in a year. And there is a report that has been done on spawning season on Lunella undulata. But no further study has been focusing on this species or even the militaries. In order to know the reproductive cycle, gonadosomatic index will be used. The turban snail will be dissected, and then the gonad will be cut into 3 section area, and then this cross-sectional will be taken the image by using the dissecting microscope. Normally, the gonad area will be higher if they are ready to spawn, but they will decrease once they already spawn. So this is the way how to recognize them. And also in my species, in order to measure the size of D, G, and G, I will do this according to the color differentiation, which is like for male, normally the gonad is a bit creamy, and then the females is a bit greeny. And this picture will be analyzed according to ImageJ software. So my research question. My study is intended to address the following specific knowledge gaps. For the first one, do the 3 Turbinidae species that occur in New South Wales has a different thermal tolerance and preferred temperature? Second one, how does the nutritional properties and trace element compare between these 3 edible snails in Australia? What is the reproductive cycle and spawning cycle for the most common turban snail, Lunella undulata, in New South Wales? How do the nutritional properties and trace element of Lunella undulata vary across reproductive season? And the fifth one, does elevated temperature will impact the proximate and trace element of edible turban snails in Australia? In order to answer this question, my study will be divided into 5 main objectives. For the first and second objective, I'm going to cover all of the 3 edible turban snails, and then the rest I'm going to do model species, which I'm going to focus on Lunella undulata. For the first aims, I'm going to determine the critical thermal maximum and preferred temperature for these 3 edible turban snails. The second one, I'm going to compare the proximate composition, fatty acid composition, and trace element in these 3 Turbinidae species. And the third one, I'm going to assess the reproductive cycle of Lunella undulata by monthly sampling of the gonadosomatic index. And the